They say you do not just marry a person, you marry their family, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes, marrying into the right family can cost you your soul, and if you aren't careful, it can cost you your freedom. The Waldorf Astoria was completely silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner of the room. In the groom's suite, the atmosphere was suffocating. Malik stood near the window. His custom-tailored tuxedo was crisp. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. In exactly 45 minutes, he was scheduled to walk down an aisle covered in imported white orchids. He was supposed to marry Victoria Sterling, the sole heiress to the Sterling real estate empire. But Malik wasn't looking at his beautiful bride. He was looking at Arthur Sterling, her billionaire father. Arthur's face was twisted in a sneer. It was the specific kind of sneer that only a man who has never been told no can produce. Arthur had just thrown a 70-page legal document directly at Malik's chest. The heavy, watermarked paper bounced off Malik's tuxedo and crumpled onto the polished hardwood floor. "Sign it, Malik," Arthur barked, casually adjusting his diamond cufflinks. "Or you don't walk out of this room. You don't marry my daughter, and I will make absolutely sure you never work in the financial sector in this country again." Victoria stood just behind her father. Her arms were tightly crossed. Her green eyes were completely cold. The mask was finally off. The woman Malik thought he loved was looking at him as if he were a peasant who had just tracked mud onto her Persian rug. "Just sign it, Malik," she sighed, checking her perfect reflection in the vanity mirror. "It's standard. It just protects the family legacy. Don't be difficult today of all days." It was a prenuptial agreement, but it was not a normal one. It was a brutal, draconian trapdoor of a contract. It stated that Malik would receive absolutely zero assets in the event of a divorce. It stated that he waived his right to any spousal support. But more importantly, it stated that he had zero legal connection, zero claim, and zero liability regarding any of the Sterling family businesses, trusts, or offshore accounts. It essentially said that legally, economically, and fundamentally, Malik was a ghost. Malik looked down at the crumpled paper on the floor. He let a look of absolute devastation wash over his face. He let his shoulders slump. He let his voice tremble as he bent down to pick it up. "You're treating me like a criminal, Arthur," Malik whispered, playing the part of a broken man perfectly. Arthur laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound that echoed in the luxurious suite. "I'm treating you like an employee, Malik. Sign the paper." So Malik picked up the solid gold pen. He forced his hand to shake. He signed his name on the dotted line. Arthur snatched the paper back, a victorious grin spreading across his face. Billionaire patriarch thought he had just bullied a poor, inner-city kid into giving up millions of dollars. But as Arthur turned his back, Malik's trembling immediately stopped. A slow, quiet smile spread across the groom's face. Arthur Sterling thought he had just protected his massive empire from a gold digger. He didn't know that he had just handed Malik absolute, ironclad legal immunity from the federal indictment that was coming for the entire Sterling family. In exactly 32 days. To understand how a man like Malik ended up in a room with a monster like Arthur Sterling, you have to understand the collision of two completely different worlds. Malik grew up on the south side of Chicago. His mother was a high school math teacher, a strict woman who raised him on a steady diet of discipline and numbers. She used to tell him, "Numbers don't lie, Malik, people lie, but the math always tells the truth." Malik took those words to heart. He worked tirelessly. He earned a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University, and he became a forensic accountant. He didn't just balance books, he dissected them. He was the guy that top-tier firms brought in when they suspected someone was embezzling millions. He was the bloodhound for bad math. By the time he was 32 years old, Malik was a senior auditor at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. He was making excellent money, but it was absolutely nothing compared to the billionaires he investigated on a daily basis. That is when he met Victoria. It happened at a high society charity gala. Malik had been forced to attend by his firm's partners. Victoria was standing by a massive ice sculpture, wearing a designer dress that cost more than Malik's first car. She looked completely bored out of her mind. She was stunning. High cheekbones, piercing eyes, and an effortless arrogance that Malik tragically mistook for confidence. He offered her a drink. They started talking. She found his background refreshing. In hindsight, that should have been his first red flag. To a woman raised in a multi-million-dollar penthouse on the Upper East Side, a black man from the South Side who made his own way wasn't viewed as an equal partner. He was a novelty. He was a project, but Malik was blinded by the light. Victoria was intoxicating. She introduced him to a world he had only ever seen in movies, private jets to Aspen for the weekend, Dinners where the wine bill was $10,000. Exclusive access to quiet rooms where billionaires casually decided the fate of entire cities over imported cigars. For the first year, it felt like a modern fairy tale. Malik thought he was living the ultimate American dream. He truly believed that love had transcended class. But then, he met her father. Arthur Sterling was a man who believed the world was his personal chessboard, and everyone else was simply a pawn waiting to be sacrificed. He had made his vast fortune in commercial real estate and international shipping. He was ruthless. He was politically connected, and he was terrifyingly calm. Malik's first dinner with the patriarch took place at the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. The house looked more like a museum than a home. Arthur sat at the head of a massive mahogany dining table that could comfortably seat 40 people. Arthur didn't stand to greet him. He didn't ask about Malik's mother, or his upbringing, or his dreams. His very first words to Malik, spoken just as the waiter poured the soup, were calculated to destroy. "So, Malik," Arthur said smoothly. "Forensic accounting. You count other people's money because you don't have the stomach to make your own." Malik froze. Victoria simply laughed, taking a delicate sip of her champagne. "Daddy, be nice," she purred. "He's very good at his little job." His little job. Malik swallowed his pride. He kept his composure. "I like the puzzle of it, sir," Malik replied evenly. "I like finding what people try to hide." Arthur's eyes narrowed, just a fraction of a millimeter. It was a micro-expression. But in Malik's line of work, you learned to read faces just as well as you read spreadsheets. And in that split second, Malik didn't see typical billionaire arrogance. He saw a flash of genuine threat. "Well," Arthur said, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin, "in my world, the men who go digging for things usually end up buried." It was a death threat wrapped in a casual observation. From that night onward, the psychological warfare began. Arthur went out of his way to remind Malik of his place at the bottom of the food chain. When Victoria and Malik got engaged, Arthur didn't offer congratulations. Instead, he handed Malik a thick catalog for luxury watches and told him to pick one out. "So you at least look like you belong in our family photos," Arthur had sneered. Malik hated the man, but he loved Victoria. Or at least he loved the version of her she played when her father wasn't in the room. Malik convinced himself that once they were married, they would distance themselves from the family. He thought he could pull her away from the toxicity. He was incredibly naive. And that naivety almost cost him his life. The turning point happened 3 months before the wedding. Malik was spending the weekend at the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. Victoria was out doing a cake tasting with her mother in the city. Malik was sitting in Arthur's massive, two-story home library, quietly reading a book. Suddenly, Arthur walked into the room. He looked unusually stressed. He was pacing, holding his cell phone to his ear. His voice was hushed but furious. "I don't care what the Port Authority says," Arthur hissed into the phone, completely unaware that Malik was sitting in the high-backed leather chair by the window. "Move the Cayman assets through the Shell Corporation in Cyprus. Wash it through the new commercial developments in Miami. Do not let the feds look at the manifest. Handle it today." Arthur hung up the phone. He turned around, and he saw Malik. The silence in the room dropped to absolute zero. "Malik," Arthur said, his voice dangerously soft, "how long have you been in here?" "I just got here, sir," Malik lied. His heart was pounding against his ribs, but his face remained completely blank. "Just reading about the Civil War." Arthur stared at him. He was calculating. He was trying to decide if this accountant was a threat. But Arthur's legendary arrogance took over. He figured a guy from the South Side wouldn't understand the high-level financial jargon he had just been using. "Good," Arthur said, his posture relaxing slightly. "Listen, since you're the numbers guy, my chief financial officer is having a minor issue balancing a ledger for one of our subsidiary LLCs. It's a small philanthropic fund. Just a mess of receipts. You want to make yourself useful this weekend. Take a look at it." Arthur tossed a thick leather binder onto the mahogany desk. "Don't take it out of this room," he ordered before turning on his heel and leaving. Malik should have walked away. He should have gone to the kitchen and poured a drink, but his mother's voice echoed in his head. The math always tells the truth, and Arthur's phone call had triggered every single alarm bell in Malik's forensic auditor brain. Cayman assets, Cyprus shells, Miami developments. That wasn't real estate protocol. That was the textbook, geographical triangle of international money laundering. Malik walked over to the desk. He opened the binder. At first glance, it looked like a boring, standard ledger for a charity called the Sterling Urban Renewal Initiative. It showed innocent donations coming in and grants going out to construction firms down in Florida. But Malik was not a normal accountant. He looked for the invisible threads. He pulled out his laptop. He connected to a secure, encrypted VPN. He started running the employer identification numbers of the construction firms receiving the massive grants. The companies didn't exist, they were phantom corporations. They were registered to empty P.O. boxes in rundown strip malls. Next, Malik looked at the incoming donations. Massive, multi-million dollar influxes from a holding company in Cyprus. He dug into the public records for the holding company. It was owned by a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. Malik sat there in the cold, quiet library, and the terrifying reality washed over him like ice water. Arthur Sterling wasn't just a ruthless real estate mogul. He was washing dirty money. Hundreds of millions of dollars of it. Based on the routing paths, the aggressive volume, and the Port Authority mentions, this wasn't just white-collar tax evasion. This was cartel money, or human trafficking money, or illegal arms money. The entire Sterling real estate empire was nothing but a massive, legitimate front to clean dirty cash. And suddenly, Arthur's intense hostility toward Malik made perfect sense. Arthur didn't just hate Malik because he was poor or because he was black. Arthur was terrified of him because Malik was an auditor. He was a bloodhound that Victoria had accidentally let into her father's extremely illegal henhouse. Malik carefully closed the binder. He wiped his fingerprints off the leather cover using his shirt sleeve. He shut his laptop. He felt physically sick. He had to get out. He had to break off the engagement immediately and run as far away as possible. But as he packed his bags in the guest room that night, a dark, paralyzing realization stopped him cold. If he broke off the engagement suddenly, Arthur would know exactly why. Arthur would assume Malik had seen something in that ledger. And men who launder hundreds of millions of dollars for international cartels do not let loose ends simply walk away. If Malik ran, he would likely end up at the bottom of the Hudson River before the end of the week. Furthermore, Malik was already compromised. He had been living with Victoria. He had attended corporate board dinners. He had been photographed on yachts with these criminals. To the outside world, and to the federal agents who were undoubtedly already investigating the Sterlings, Malik looked like a core member of the inner circle. If the FBI raided the Sterling Empire, they would look at the forensic accountant fiancé and assume he was the mastermind cleaning the books. He was the perfect fall guy. Arthur would absolutely throw him to the wolves to save himself and his daughter. Malik couldn't run, and he couldn't stay. He needed a shield. He needed a legally binding document, signed by Arthur himself, that completely and utterly severed Malik from the Sterling finances. He needed paper evidence that proved he had zero access, zero knowledge, and zero benefit from the criminal empire. He needed a prenuptial agreement, but there was a massive catch. If Malik asked for a prenup, it would look incredibly suspicious. Guys with a negative net worth do not ask billionaires for prenuptial agreements. Malik had to make Arthur force him to sign one. He had to manipulate the billionaire into designing a contract so brutal, so exclusionary, that no federal judge in America would ever believe Malik was part of the enterprise. So, Malik started playing a character. For the next 2 months leading up to the wedding, Malik became the most annoying, inquisitive, gold-digging fiancé on the planet. He started aggressively asking Victoria about our future investments. He started making loud comments at family dinners about how he couldn't wait to be appointed to the Sterling Board of Directors. He repeatedly asked Arthur, in front of the family lawyers, when he would finally get the access codes to the family trust accounts. He played the role of the greedy, entitled parasite perfectly. Arthur's disgust grew with every single passing day. Malik could literally see the gears turning in the billionaire's head. Arthur thought Malik was trying to sink his claws into the illicit money. The billionaire took the bait. Which brings the story back to the bridal suite at the Waldorf Astoria. The day of the wedding. The trap was fully set. Malik just had to survive the jaws closing around him. When Arthur and Victoria ambushed him with the 70-page document, Malik's performance deserved an Academy Award. "Vicky," Malik had pleaded, using the nickname he knew her father absolutely despised. "You're okay with this. You're okay with him treating our marriage like a corporate transaction." Victoria had looked at him with eyes devoid of any human warmth. "It's not personal, Malik, it's just business. The Sterling assets are complex. We can't have an outsider having any legal footing. Daddy's lawyers drafted it so that you are completely insulated from the family businesses. You get nothing from the trusts. You have no liability, no access, no equity. It's cleaner this way." No liability, no access, no equity. Those words were absolute music to Malik's ears. It was exactly what he needed. It was the ultimate alibi. Malik had skimmed down to Section 4, Clause B of the document. It read, The party of the second part hereby waives any and all rights, claims, access, or liabilities to any corporate entities, offshore accounts, trusts, or holdings associated with the party of the first part and her family. The party of the second part shall be considered a legally distinct and unassociated entity regarding all financial operations. It was a masterpiece of legal exclusion. Arthur's high-priced, Ivy League lawyers had built a titanium wall to keep Malik out of their money. They didn't realize they had just built a bomb shelter to protect Malik from the federal blast. After Malik signed the document, he walked down the aisle. The wedding was a spectacular, sickening display of illicit wealth. Malik smiled for the cameras. He danced the first dance. He kissed his new, treacherous bride. And every time he looked over at Arthur, the billionaire gave him a smug, knowing look. Arthur truly thought he had a leash around Malik's neck. The marriage was a complete sham from day one. Victoria treated him like a minor accessory. Malik slept in the guest room of their penthouse. He went to work at his firm. He kept his head down. He was just waiting for the clock to strike zero. It took exactly 32 days. It happened at a massive charity gala at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Arthur Sterling was on stage, receiving a Philanthropist of the Year award. Victoria was sitting at the VIP table, wearing a diamond necklace that likely paid for a hitman in Bogota. Arthur was halfway through his arrogant acceptance speech when the heavy oak doors to the banquet hall violently blew open. They weren't security guards. They were federal agents, dozens of them. Wearing windbreakers with FBI and IRS Criminal Investigation Division written in bright yellow letters. They swarmed the room. The classical music abruptly stopped. Billionaires gasped and spilled their $1,000 champagne. A senior federal agent walked right up to the stage, completely ignoring the cameras. Arthur Sterling, the agent's voice boomed over the unmuted microphone. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and multiple violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Arthur's face went chalk white, but his arrogant instincts immediately kicked in. He held his hands up, trying to look unbothered as the agent slapped heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. At the table, Victoria started screaming. Do you know who we are? You can't do this to us. Agents grabbed her arms, pulling her out of her chair. Victoria Sterling, you are under arrest as a co-conspirator and acting officer of the Sterling Trust. Malik stood by the table. His hands were casually tucked into his tuxedo pockets. An FBI agent approached him. The agent looked at a photograph, then looked at Malik. Malik, you're the husband. I am, Malik said calmly. You're an accountant, right? The agent asked, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Arthur, who was being led past their table by two agents, suddenly stopped. His eyes locked onto Malik. The panic in the billionaire's face morphed into a desperate, vicious strategy. He was going to throw Malik to the wolves right then and there. Officer, Arthur shouted, pointing his cuffed hands frantically at Malik. Check his computers. He's a forensic accountant. He handles all the family books. If there's any irregularity, Malik did it. He's the chief financial officer for the family. Victoria chimed in, weeping hysterically. Yes, Malik handles everything. We don't know anything about the numbers. Ask Malik. They turned on him in a matter of seconds, exactly like he knew they would. The FBI agent looked back at Malik, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Sir, you're going to have to come with us. Malik didn't flinch. He slowly reached into the breast pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Careful, the agent warned, his hand moving instantly to his holster. Just getting a business card, agent, Malik said slowly, moving his hands where they could be seen. He pulled out a crisp white card and handed it to the federal officer. That is the contact information for my attorney, Mr. Vance, Malik said. He projected his voice so Arthur could hear every single word over the chaos. He is expecting your call. And he has a certified, notarized copy of a prenuptial agreement, drafted by Arthur Sterling's own legal team. Arthur stopped struggling against the guards. He stared at Malik, total confusion washing over his aging face. Malik looked right into his father-in-law's eyes. You see, agent, Malik continued, his voice echoing with absolute authority. That document explicitly states that I have absolutely zero access, liability, or knowledge of any Sterling family accounts, trusts, or LLCs. Arthur insisted on it. He forced me to sign it under duress on our wedding day. The document legally defines me as a completely separate entity. I am not an officer. I am not an employee. I am legally barred from even looking at their books. You'll find my signature nowhere on their ledgers. Edit. The FBI agent paused. He looked at the business card. Then he looked at Arthur. Arthur's jaw literally dropped. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. The realization hit the billionaire like a physical blow. The titanium wall he had built to keep the poor kid out of his money was now the titanium wall keeping the kid out of federal prison. He set me up, Arthur stammered, his arrogant facade completely shattered into a million pieces. I didn't set you up, Arthur, Malik said quietly, stepping closer to the broken man. You built the trap, I just let you walk into it. Victoria was sobbing uncontrollably as agents dragged her out of the museum in her designer gown. Arthur looked like a hollowed-out shell, his legs giving out as the agents practically had to carry him to the exit doors. The FBI did not handcuff Malik. They took his statement, they took his attorney's card, and they left him standing freely in the ballroom. The trial that followed was a media circus of epic proportions. It turned out the FBI had been building a RICO case against Arthur Sterling for 3 years. They had wiretaps, they had informants, they had a mountain of circumstantial evidence. But they didn't have the clean, undeniable financial proof to tie the Cyprus shell companies directly to the Miami real estate. During the discovery phase of the trial, Malik's lawyer anonymously submitted a highly specific tip to the prosecution. The tip detailed the exact location of a specific leather binder, hidden inside the false bottom of a mahogany desk in Arthur's Hampton's library. That binder was the final nail in the coffin. Because of the ironclad prenuptial agreement, the federal government couldn't touch Malik. He was completely indemnified. His accounting firm conducted an exhausting internal audit of his work and found that his hands were completely clean. Arthur Sterling was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Victoria, who had signed hundreds of fraudulent documents as an acting officer of the trust, was sentenced to 8 years. All of their illicit assets, the luxury penthouses, the super yachts, the offshore accounts, were seized by the federal government. The Sterling empire was reduced to dust. As for the marriage, Malik filed for an annulment based on fraud. It was granted almost immediately by the courts. Malik walked away from the Sterling family with exactly what Arthur had demanded he have, nothing. He walked away with no money. He walked away with no properties. He walked away with no legacy. But he walked away a free man. He walked away with his professional license fully intact. And he walked away with his peace of mind. Today, Malik still lives in Chicago. He started his own auditing firm. His company specializes in helping nonprofits and small businesses protect themselves from corporate predators. He makes a very good living. And with his first major profit check, he bought his mother a beautiful house with a wraparound porch. Sometimes, Malik watches the evening news. Occasionally, he sees an update on Arthur Sterling, showing the former billionaire sitting in a maximum security prison, wearing a cheap, faded orange jumpsuit. And Malik remembers the exact way Arthur looked when he threw that crumpled piece of paper at his chest. Arthur thought he was the smartest man in the room simply because he had money. But Malik's mother was right. Numbers don't lie. And if you do the math, arrogance multiplied by greed always, eventually, equals destruction. What do you think of Malik's story? Was he a genius for playing the long game and letting the Sterling family dig their own graves? Or was the psychological toll too risky of a gamble? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story, hit that subscribe button. Like the video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that money doesn't make you invincible. Until next time, keep your eyes open, read the fine print, and never let anyone tell you what you're worth.